Welcome everyone. Welcome to this video about application modernization and migration towards the AWS platform. Today I'm here in the studio with three guests. My name is Jeroen Jacobs from Oblivion. I have Stijn, Bas and Ruud at the table. And let's start with the introduction. So Stijn, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Stijn Huizinga, CTO at Oblivion, and also a cloud consultant at night. So I'd like to keep my hands dirty with all technical stuff on AWS, trying to keep myself certified. I'm an APN ambassador, and that's roughly it, I think.
Okay.
Bas de Natris, I'm a cloud consultant at Oblivion. I'm also the company security officer, and I've been focusing for, 5-6 years already on the Migration Acceleration Program and working with various customers on migrations to AWS, small scale and quite large scale.
And then our external guest.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Ruud Dam. I lead migration and modernization for AWS in Benelux and Nordics. And the majority of what we do together with our customers and partners is through the Migration Acceleration Program.
So quite some migration and modernization experience at the table today. Well, let's first start before we dive in the details and the characteristics of migration modernization programs. Let's start with the drivers of going towards the cloud, going to AWS specifically. Bas, would you like to say something about it?
Yeah, there is no definitive answer. You see companies moving to the cloud because of the agility, the speed, the ability to deliver new customer functionality at much greater speed than they ever could with their on-prem infrastructure. You see other companies be more financially driven, the need to clear up a lot of technical debt without having to spend a lot of capital on modernizations and new investments. Some purely go for a lower lower operating cost, lower total cost of ownership. And in reality, especially when you deal with larger enterprises, it's a mixture of all of it. It's a bit of speed and agility. It's cleaning up technical debt without having the very large scale investments in pursuit of lower TCO. Sometimes increased security needs, where they start to find out that maintaining a world-class IT security in an on-prem environment is very costly, and you have to take care of what AWS in the shared responsibility model would see as their level. Well, in cloud, you don't have to do that. AWS does that for you. In your own world, you have to do it yourself. So if you want to continue doing that, it will be more complex, more costly, require more people, and therefore often more external help. Whereas on cloud, it's still not easy and still requires a lot of constant attention and focus, but it will help you. So multiple reasons, and there's seldom, especially when dealing with large enterprises, one single reason. It's always a combination of multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm. I see you confirming, Ruud.
Yeah, I definitely recognize the view from Bas here, that cost is always a conversation starter, or at least always part of the conversation. Yeah. But at the same time, it can be because of a compelling event for a customer to exit a data center, or more related to their business strategy. In the context of their digital transformation to better serve their customers and also employees, or customers that simply want to be faster in adopting new geographies because they are expanding globally, or they want to onboard new entities in the context of mergers and acquisitions. So a variety of business drivers. And last but not least, so also see some cases where technology plays a prominent role, that customers migrate to the cloud because they see it as, from a cybersecurity point of view, a safer option.
Okay, well, talking about technology drivers on the cloud, Stijn, any insights that you have built up the last years?
Yeah, not specifically one reason, but I think it's the total package again. Looking at the speed where AWS launches new features, it's amazing. Last year, around 1,500 new releases. So if you divide by the number of days in a year, it's amazing that you have multiple new releases, some smaller, some bigger, during a year. without having to invest in that. And that's already part of the total pricing. And not last but not least, what also is important is people retention. So if you want to attract talent and build cool stuff, you also need a cool platform to work with the latest features. If you currently want to hire talent and you are still on-prem in a more legacy kind of environment, that's not really attractive for people to join.
The subject of today is modernization and migration. If we look in the market, what's the percentage? Is the majority of the engagements modernization driven, or just migration driven with a more lift and shift approach? Any insights on that?
At least in my experience, again, it's a bit of a mixture. If it's migration, then at least in a number of recent engagement that we've been working on, it wasn't a straight lift and shift. It was let's move on to Kubernetes, because we want to go to containers, and we wouldn't even know where to start to do that on-prem. So it's not a complete refactoring to make applications cloud native, but at least is a step in a more modern infrastructure. But even with the more lift and shift type, it's again, they're always a combination. Well, yeah, there's some that we may lift and shift, but especially for the more strategic, that is a first step towards a further going modernization, refactoring, making it more cloud native, breaking it up into microservices. And AWS has been touting the word microservices for years, but we're now hearing it back also from large enterprises who are nowhere near that, but at least that is their future vision, and they start seeing what the benefits are of having different services that you can pull together in creating new solutions for your customers. And that's a lot easier doing that on cloud. If you want to do that on-prem, well, there's lots of enabling services that you would have to buy, install, continue to manage, etc., which again will make the hurdle way too big to ever get there.
Yeah. It also often makes sense to migrate first and then optimize and modernize. Because once you are in the cloud, proximity to new features, your data, everything is much closer, and you don't have integration issues. If you keep a part of your landscape on-prem and a part in the cloud, it's really complex. It's easier to lift and shift and then optimize.
Okay.
Yeah, another element of phasing in this context that I see happening a lot is that, back also to Stein's point on gaining the experience, that customers migrate, lift and shift very often applications where they feel, okay, let's bring those to the cloud first. And then in a second phase, very often part of the optimization and modernization effort is to also migrate their core applications, the business critical applications, including ERP from SAP, for instance. And I see a trend coming now worldwide, not only in Europe or in other regions, but worldwide. There's also a focus on migrating and modernization of mainframes even. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So until now, we're mainly discussing migrations from a more data center or on-premise environment. Have you seen already migrations from another cloud provider towards AWS?
Also seen those, quite a bit actually. It's a good point because it's not only the large enterprises that are open to migrate to the cloud. It's indeed also the more cloud native software companies, digital natives, ISVs, basically across every industry where we see this happening. Yes, also from cloud to cloud. But also those customers, for instance, on discussed with an ISV last week, when they win a new customer, one of their SaaS customers, of course they also want to run their customers on the cloud. And very often they choose AWS as their platform of choice. So across different industries. So I'm sure you recognize the same.
Yeah, and we've see moving from one of the other cloud providers. You see movements out of private clouds, which doesn't seem to be a very particularly strong solution. or clouds that are much smaller. Years ago, there were I don't know, probably a dozen cloud providers, and Gartner used to track about a dozen, and now it's sort of the big three, the big four, and very slowly we now see also some migrations from one of the other hyperscalers towards AWS, where it's better to concentrate a number of related applications onto one cloud platform, and keep that together, also to reduce costs in terms of datacom, latency, etc. And years ago, a lot of companies started on multi-cloud, but never really thought it through, and now that's being started. Some sort of a cleanup, more logic in if you're going to do multi-cloud, what's going to run where. And that will, I think, drive a lot of cleanup and some migrations as well.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of evolution, maybe almost, if that's the right word, that customers just started from a procurement, buying, tactical angle. Okay, let's go for multi-cloud because we don't want to put all our eggs into one basket. That now more strategically, and now they feel more comfortable working in the cloud. Okay, let's pick one cloud provider. And take the benefits that you spoke about, as well as also the what was the word I was looking for here? Why have two types of cloud center of excellence if you can deal with one and one landing zone? So there are a lot of benefits, of course, to that model as well.
Yeah, it's less complex to run one public cloud rather than having all flavors.
And I think that rationalization of all the multi-cloud efforts of the past year, where not necessarily it will all become one cloud, which I think from a economic perspective and simplification perspective would be ideal, but there's still some hesitance there. But there's at least more rationale behind, okay, well, this limited subset we're going to run on this other cloud because either skills or a particular interest in some certain features that only that cloud delivers, etc. And the rest will have on one cloud platform. So I think you'll see more and more of those migrations as well.
Yeah, and then let's be fair. There may be very good reasons due to local regulations to still use certain applications on-prem, which is absolutely fine. But then it's also good for customers to understand that via AWS Outpost, they can run their on-premise workload as if they were on the cloud and get the benefits, also the technical benefits of serving it as one cloud. More or less.
And sometimes we even meet customers, they are migrating within AWS itself. As early adopters of AWS, they started using the platform about 12, 13 years ago. They build up something, and it's more focused on EC2, running everything on EC2 instances, etc. And now they realize, oh, well, this doesn't really scale that well. So let's move to serverless slowly. So that's also a migration within AWS itself.
Yes. Okay, well, then let's continue with the next topic. So we discussed the drivers of migration and modernization, but it goes with a journey. It's not a one-day exercise, obviously. So let's walk through a typical cloud customer journey. Bas, I know you explain this a lot.
This is sort of our talking slide. You can use it to clarify a lot of things and also clarify that where you are and where you want to be is typically not an immediate straight line. Oh, let's just fix this and then we can be up in our level of maturity. On the other hand, I don't think we have a single customer that followed this exact cloud journey. So it's more an aspiration than anything else. But with all customers that are somewhere on this journey, they have done some of these things, or in the end you need to do all of them, and some of them, and we could have drawn circles around everything, because a lot of things, well, hey, you do your cloud operating model, and you decide how we're going to run this, because if you don't do that, you end up running your cloud as if it's your on-prem data center, which is not which is really the model to avoid. But in the beginning, when you only have a few more specialized workloads on AWS, your cloud operating model may differ from when actually AWS hosts the majority of your applications. So a cloud operating model is not a one-off thing. It is something that will help you with where you are today. And a year later, when your use of AWS starts to change, you may need to revisit that. Similar with your compliance control framework. You're never going to do it all before your first workload because it's way too much work. But when applications that are more critical, have more security requirements, etc., move on, you need to revisit that and update that. And typically, the implementation of your change requirements isn't that complex and doesn't come with a lot of investment that you have to write off. No, you can just keep adding and reinforcing and improving. Similarly with your landing zone. You build a landing zone, and we do a lot of them, but a landing zone isn't a static thing. It will evolve over time, partially because your requirements change, partially because AWS will deliver new features where what you spend a lot of time building yourself is now suddenly something that comes out of the box. Well, then you can incorporate that. So you start out with customers discussing what's the value for cloud, where is the biggest value, and in what order should I therefore start migrating. Business cases are funny because I've been talking to quite a few customers where the CIO or the chief technology officer will tell, don't spend time on that. We don't need that. I've already taken the decision. Well, then still you need it because the cloud journey will at some point be a little difficult. There will be competing priorities from other initiatives by your company, and having a good business case that really incorporated all the benefits of cloud, but also all the cost will help you get through those difficult moments. So there's a lot of things in there in that cloud journey that we've developed that you will need, and it will help you on time figure out, well, okay, but if we're going to be there, I need a much bigger proportion of my staff to understand AWS. And what you said, having a modern platform to work on is critical in the ability to hire new talent. And I completely agree with that. On the other hand, if you don't train up your own people on time, that will become an inhibitor. And if you start it too late, then that may delay your ability to migrate things to AWS. So all these things play together. As said, almost nobody will. This is the most logical order that at least we think. Mm-hmm. And typically you see little detours and oh no, we have to go back here and do that again, and then move on. But that's good because with a lot of even small steps, you can already deliver value.
Okay, well, thanks for explaining. We will definitely come back to this visualization soon to dive into some of those priorities. But let's first have a look at the Migration Acceleration Program. I think the expertise of Ruud. So can you explain a bit about the MAP program of AWS?
Yeah, absolutely. But first of all, I really like the cloud journey that just explained. Is that it's very rich. It's far more details than what you see in the context of the Migration Acceleration Program, where we simplified it to 3 phases: assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize. And I also like the point Bas hinted on is that it may be iterative process that you may get back. So although also here, assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize is visualized as if it were a kind of chronological order. And of course, there's some logic. You use that word to it, but it may not be always be the case. We spoke about customers that are already quite experienced on the cloud. They probably need less work on mobilize activities, or simply say, okay, we did an assess phase. Let's migrate now, and maybe do some mobilize activities, as we would call it, in parallel. So that's one. The other remark I would like to make is that this is just a methodology. But what I mean with just a methodology, that there's more to it than the methodology. The program as such also includes everything around training and certification. There are investments in there. Partners like yourself play a very prominent role in at least 70% of all the migrations that are happening across the globe. So again, happy to be here today. And the other thing I would like to highlight, that when it comes to this methodology, but it also applies to the entire program, that it already has been there for 6 years. So my favorite way of describing it is as a collection of best practices and lessons learned. So we've been through experiences with customers and partners with over thousands of migrations. And that will all boil down into how we define the program, which is one-on-one, but more elaborative on your side with what just shared.
Okay, so the MAP program and the migration framework of AWS has those 3 phases. But I know AWS brings more to the table. It's supporting clients and partners with this program. Can you share more detail about that?
Absolutely. So in every phase, there are a lot of artifacts and tools and people and partners available to assist our customers to make it for them as easy as possible. Because we don't deny that migrations may be complex, right? So then to have a safe pair of hands with a partner based upon a proven program is the right way to go. To name a couple of examples here, the business case can be evaluated or can be proceeded by the usage of a migration evaluator tool. So you can automatically assess, okay, what is it that we need, that we currently run in terms of servers, CPUs, memory, what have you, even the dependencies that may exist between application. The same is true for the mobilize phase. If you are working with a customer, for instance, on the landing zone or their cloud center of excellence, there are a lot of best practices that we are happy to share from other customers. And similarly, in the migration and modernize phase, there's a lot of tooling, best practices, workshops, whatever customer needs. But that will come clear in the assess phase itself. We bring it to the table.
Okay, and I know there's also a financial benefit, or can you explain that concept?
Yeah, definitely. It's good that you help remind me, Jeroen, because it's an important pillar, but not the most important pillar. But let me explain why it's there first. We recognize that customers may face what we call double bubble cost. They have their current environment and they want to migrate to AWS. So at a certain point of time, they may have double cost. And we take our responsibility by also helping our customers offset some of these costs. And depending on what is it that the customer is planning to migrate, there's a model, and it's related to the phases that we just discussed: assess, mobilize, migrate, and modernize. And we bring 2 types of investments: partner cash. So, for instance, if a customer wants to work with Oblivion to assess them on the business case, we fund that business case up to a maximum of $60,000. Similarly, and related to your journey, we can take the language that resonates in the mobilize phase, depending on the annual run rate. So again, the consumption of AWS services, we fund up to a maximum of $400,000 on a one-to-one dollar basis, and again, for external consultancy costs for a customer that want to benefit from the experience from Oblivion, but also looking at the migration itself or the modernization that comes with a monthly bill. And based upon that monthly bill, we give credits either via the partner or to the customers directly, or whatever is needed, of at least 25% of that value. That's in a nutshell the investments that we bring. And probably also good to mention here, because that's the aspect where I'm most enthusiastic about, is that we do not ask for a commitment. Because a lot of customers told us, please, stop asking about a commitment. We are not ready yet. And we took that into account. And since 2.5 years now, we don't expect our customers to make a commitment. Yes, we need to do a proper business case. Yes, there is a kind of budget that we expect the customer to reach. But it's only based upon the intention of the customer. And we trust our customers to reach that over a period of 3 years.
Yeah. It's interesting, because we heard the same complaints, don't ask us for a commitment, and obviously, especially large enterprises have been bitten in the past by large software houses giving very low cost per seat. If you commit to a number that eventually you figure out you're never going to reach, but you still have to pay. And customers are quite rightly very, very afraid of that.
Absolutely.
And we've been called in several times where customers told us, oh yeah, AWS tried to do the same. So no. Let's look at the fine print. And let me take you through it and explain to you why AWS is doing it, because they they're still quite rightfully afraid of committing themselves, and it takes a while to get their heads around that actually this is a soft commitment. It's an intention. It needs to be a really realistic plan. But if for different circumstances you're not going to get there, well, then nobody's going to call you and say, I want my money back, or you have to pay it anyway. Yeah. Which with the old software enterprise agreements was always the big fear, where in retrospect it was never as attractive as you thought it was. And this program is in that respect, I think, much more mature and therefore much more useful, even although some customers are still, well, uncertain whether they should sign up for it. It's not a real...
I'm happy that you share that, Bas, because when that happens, we understand that customers may not be convinced only because we say so. Mm-hmm. But then we challenge the customers. Yeah. Okay, we understand that. Let us be fully transparent. Here is the term sheet that you're expected to accept. Please share it with your friends from procurement and legal, and let them comment. And in 99% of the cases, customers just, okay, this is perfect. Yeah. There may be a question or so. Okay, absolutely fine. But most of them will be good to go. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think it's clear that we're quite excited about this MAP program and all the benefits that come with it. Let's go back to our cloud journey and walk through the steps and relate it to the Migration Acceleration Program, and dive into some learnings and some practical examples. So starting with assess, I think looking at the visualization, it's about the first few bullets.
Yeah, it's sort of the first hill which you climb up, and some of them literally translate almost one-on-one. Now, obviously, most customers that are looking at a migration are already on AWS in some shape or form. It's very rare that a customer from nothing will go up to a full migration, but even that happens. But even if they are already on AWS, you still need to look at your discovery strategy. What applications are in scope for migration? Is there any technical hurdle that you need to go over? If it's third-party applications, how about licensing, etc. So there, you have some work to do in the discovery phase. Now AWS has some tooling that you can use for that. Otherwise, it becomes quite a bit of manual work. I said a business case, which is part of the assess phase, and what I just said, even if you think you don't need one, you do need one. And the fact is, AWS under this program will pay for it, but don't just do it because it won't cost you money. You are going to regret not having one, and that's my lesson learned from having been involved in migrations for I think nearly 7 years. The ones where we didn't have a business case, there's always a point where you think, if we just had a business case that everybody signed off on, that would help us. So you start looking at your migration readiness assessment, which is your business, which will, and I kind of like the approach. It's a structured questionnaire with lots of questions. I no longer do it in one day. We typically split it over 2 days, where if you can get a broad enough group in the room, it's not just the answers on how do you do this, where do you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5, but it's also the discussion between the different stakeholders within an organization, learning from each other, sometimes being surprised, oh my God, you guys are already doing that, well, that's great to know. Or, well, I thought you were responsible. No, you were responsible. So you bring out some best practices in the company, you bring out some gaps, so that will give you a to-do list for your actual project. Some of that we can help with, some of the things that companies want to do in-house, but at least you know, also with a bit of what's really urgent, better fix it now before you start migrating, and what's sort of, well, you'll learn this along the way, so don't worry too much, but keep an eye on it. Typically, we find that the operating model they had and the Cloud Competence Center is not set up for the post-migration world. It needs to be broader, needs to have more responsibility. And in the beginning, maybe their costs were just the AWS costs were just absorbed somewhere because they weren't too high. Now you need to start looking at charge out, or at least make it visible, start managing it seriously. So we do a lot of work in Cloud FinOps. So there's typically a need for how do you drive that model, the tooling, the dashboarding, etc. Security compliance becomes a real issue because you're now probably migrating mission critical applications, sometimes external. I work a lot in the finance world. And suddenly the regulator becomes more interested in what you're doing on cloud. So it needs to be able to stand an external audit. Landing zones, typically you're going to use new services from AWS that you may not have used at scale before. So the landing zone needs to be renewed. Sometimes completely, we build a complete new landing zone for you. Sometimes it's just upgrading the current one. So there's different tracks, building blocks and patterns. So looking at your applications that you want to migrate, and what the to-be model is. Well, if a lot of them are going to use similar services, well, why don't you pre-package them so dev team can easily pick them up and they're immediately already configured in how you need them with all the security, the backups, etc. implemented. Or at least create patterns. Well, these are the best practices for migrating this from A to B. So there's a lot of things that you identify in the assess phase of things you need to do during the mobilize phase.
So it's quite a business focused.
And that's what I like about it, because sometimes companies see this as a very technical journey. Mm-hmm. And they want to talk landing zone, they want to talk migration tooling. The MRA typically brings to light, well, hang on, that's important and not always easy. But there's a lot of other things that will also be critical to the success of the cloud journey, the success of the migration program. If you haven't looked at the buy-in of the business, you may have done everything and nobody's waiting to migrate. So your application owners, the business needs to be involved because you want to have some pressure on, hey, when are you guys ready? We want to migrate. We're excited. Your staff need to be retrained, but maybe you also need to talk to HR because you might need to change some things in the engineering roles and the architecting roles to reward people for becoming an AWS architect and AWS engineer. Otherwise, your training may not happen on time. So there's a lot of things that are related to the technical pieces, but not technical in itself, that you need to take care of way in advance.
Yeah. And Stijn, how do you look at that from a more technical point of view?
Well, as Bas said, it's all aligned with the technical parts. Yeah. But what I see in migrations is that we often don't make a decision. So what will happen then is that in my opinion, you can do a migration pretty fast, automated tooling, etc., etc. Then you get really quick results, or you do it the proper way and modernize everything. But often we end up in doing something in the middle, and then you have a very lengthy migration path with double costs for a long period, an error-prone process, etc. So if we are able to make a decision a little bit earlier and make a logical group of applications and say, well, for this group, it makes sense to do a full lift and shift, and we have automated tools to migrate. We use, for example, something like VMware on AWS to even simplify the migration. And at the other end of the spectrum, we have a more greenfield environment where we say, okay, well, we have this application, but yeah, it's a bit old. We don't want to touch it. Let's rebuild it and make a decision. Yeah. But don't choose something in the middle. That doesn't work.
So assess phase actually is all about building the plan and getting a justification to start.
Collecting data and also put a dot on the horizon. This is where I want to go. Yeah. You don't have to define every single detail, but at least have a direction.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think also the DSS phase helps building up confidence on the customer side. Yeah. Because every now and then they're a little bit insecure on where to start. Mm-hmm. And then having the senior leadership involvement that Bas also related to, that is something that the customer then starts to realize, hey, this is important. And also the migration readiness assessment, what I've seen there working well is that indeed it spans across business and technology. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That it's not so much about the exercise only. And by the way, it gives the customer an agnostic to AWS view on their cloud maturity. But it comes with the observations and recommendations that Oblivion then brings to the customer. Because by the end of the day, the only thing that is relevant, how can we help the customer succeed in their migration and modernization? Mm-hmm. And the assess phase, you build a plan, lay the foundation for that success, basically.
Yeah. So then we conclude the assess phase. We have a roadmap or a plan for the mobilize and for the actual migrations. So looking to highlight some of the key priorities from the mobilize phase, the landing zone, for example, Stijn, what's crucial for a good landing zone?
It's crucial for at least you are migrating to AWS, and that's not because you are migrating. No, you want to achieve something, and that achieving something is that you want to have access to new features or innovation or whatever. Mm-hmm. So your landing zone should be prepared for that, but also for the application you are migrating. So you have to start thinking about stretching your network probably. Maybe your AD is not the first mover, your user directory. So you have to have a connection to on-prem, at least for the period that you have a migration running. At the other end, you should also be prepared for things you don't know, like serverless computing. It's completely different than what you're used to. So make sure that everybody is on the right page, that you have your CISO guys with you, that they know what to do with serverless, that they understand what serverless is, that you have some controls, etc. So everything should be ready. And I think a landing zone is something, is your foundation for the coming decade. Mm-hmm. You're not going to change your landing zone very often. So it has to be a very flexible model. And by the moment you are migrating, it should be up to date. You should not use a landing zone which is already 2 years old.
And to highlight some other ones, Competence Center, Cloud Center of Excellence, Bas?
Again, it's your unless this is the 5th or 6th migration wave you're undertaking and you're already in a very mature stage, then every time you do a migration, because sometimes it's not we migrate everything, but we migrate for a certain domain or a certain technology, and we'll worry about the rest later if you deal with larger enterprises. But doing this you become more, AWS becomes more strategic to you. So you need to take a good look at your competence center. Typically for somebody who's relatively early in their use, their competence center will be the 3 or 4 people who have most experience, who are most enthusiastic. And that's great. They're the pathfinders, the pioneers who've been doing this. But now it's going to start looking differently. So you need different roles, also more business-oriented roles, because you start talking also from a good cloud competence center or cloud center of expertise, also towards business users, business owners, or application owners. So you need to have different roles, and you have to reinforce the position. So that part what always comes out of the MRA, if you perform it well, is there is a gap between what you have today in your competence center and what you need to have. And that's fine. That's normal. Sometimes customers see this and say, oh my God, I've scored a fail like it's an exam. No, it's not an exam. Every answer, the fact that you score a 2 may be because where you are today is perfectly fine for what you have today, but it's not fine for running AWS at scale. So again, there you'll have a journey of, this is my to-be competence center, which will have more roles, more responsibility, more visibility. So maybe even a more senior manager on it. Again, you're not going to be able to fill that overnight, but at least you know where you are going to. You can have that in your HR plans, etc. And you can start hiring or training internally to staff up. So by the end of the migration, or by the time applications are really coming across the line, it's already in a better shape than it was before.
Okay. And Ruud, one of the typical deliverables in a mobilization is also the migration plan and pilot migrations. Why is that so important?
Well, I think it relates to what I shared earlier, is that the Migration Acceleration Program also should help customers to build up their confidence, mm-hmm. right? And in order to gain the experience, okay, but how does it work? How does the cloud work? How do I use my landing zone? How do I migrate? To do a pilot migration mm-hmm. is a way to do that in different sprints. And if you allow me, please let me also highlight one of the other activities that I also saw on your cloud journey, and it's also one of the 8 activities of the mobilize phase in the definition of AWS, which is the training bootcamp or training plan. We spoke about the skill gap that customers may have, and this is where you as a partner play the role to address that skill gap with consultants, but also intermediately, if the customer wants to build some capabilities themselves, fine. Oblivion can help them train, but to do a proper learning need analysis is also one of the things that we see happening in almost every single customer conversation. because the customers realize that in order to run successfully in the cloud, they need to have the skills from a partner and themselves.
Okay. Well, I think we discussed enough about mobilize, and then we end up in the migrate and modernize phase. But I think
it's always about.
Yeah, you're there, but you're not done.
No.
And it's good to celebrate your accomplishments, because a migration of a little bit of scale is not an easy thing. It's hard work. It's frustrating at times. So whenever you have successes, make sure you celebrate them. Sit down, enjoy what you've accomplished, and then start looking at everything we've migrated and start thinking, okay, now that I'm on the cloud, with all these other services and things, what are bottlenecks in applications that I can remove by adopting some serverless components? Or which application that didn't scale so well in the past, what do we need to do to really make use of the ability to scale out on the cloud? And all different things related. And start building a list of things to do where your application teams go, okay, well, every time we're going to take this application through another sprint in doing things, here's also a list of things that will improve performance, improve security, reduce cost. And sometimes it's, well, if I can reduce cost by so much, well, then maybe there's entirely different use cases possible. And remember a case from a bank when they discovered the AWS Simple Notification Service and how easy it becomes to send push messages to your client. Something happens, here's a message on your phone if you want it. You can subscribe to it and you get it. And the cost, you still need to, in your application, make the translation of something happens now, I need to send out the push message. But once you've done that, the rest is just, it's an API, you dump it there and AWS take care of the rest, and the costs are minimal. Once they discovered that, there were lots of other application owners that said, well, hang on, if it's that simple and cheap, I want this too. I also want to give my customer the ability. So now you get a bit of a flywheel effect where people start discovering new things which will drive new business value or reduce the cost to a level that now suddenly becomes affordable to do this. And they start building this in. And then I think is very interesting, because now you'll get hopefully pushed from the business out an ability to start modernizing your applications. That should be pushed by the business, because there will be applications where we, from a technology perspective, might say, well, come on, modernize it, make it serverless, but the business case just isn't there. Mm-hmm. Well, then leave it as is. Make sure it's safe, secure, but don't spend money on it. So that modernization should really be business focused. But that also means that the business needs to understand what is possible in the new world. So there's quite a bit of evangelism, to use an American term, required also from the C-suite, so people start understanding, well, hang on, there's a whole new world out there that we can now fairly easily use. It's just there, try it out. If you don't like it, shut it down. Just don't forget to shut it down, otherwise the FinOps guys will start chasing you.
And Stijn, what's your takeaway from the migration phase? What are the key lessons learned there?
Once you are in AWS, I always see that you've done the migration, but now it's time to make everything cloud friendly. And once it's cloud friendly, you can start thinking about scalability, resilience, all those things. But you have to optimize. You have to make the next step. And that's making a bit more cloud native. So start using services, change your consumption model, etc. So that's the really next important step. But once the critical mass is lifted towards a public cloud, then it's much easier also to start new, like Bas said, new adventures on AWS. Oh, well, is this possible? Yes, it is possible. Well, click, and we have a new business application running and built, rather than having a very, let's say, heavy procurement process to hire or to buy software to send push notifications. It's there as a service. And sometimes it's easier than you might think. For example, if you change to, let's say, something like DynamoDB instead of MongoDB, suddenly you have those changes in your data as an event. And then going from an event in your data to a push notification, it's just a few lines of code. Yeah. So sometimes it's easier than you would think.
So that's actually why this phase is a circle in the visualization.
And
keep improving.
You keep improving. Yeah.
To be honest, it's a never-ending story because, as I said in the beginning of this video, the number of new features on AWS it's amazing. The number of new services also amazing. So you have to keep your application up to date.
Yeah. Last week we had a dinner with a group of heads of CCOEs of a number of our customers and a few prospects, and it was very open discussion. What's keeping you up at night? What's making you excited? And one of them told us, well, one of the things I do is every week I go through the new announcements and tick off. Well, hang on, this is interesting for this guy. That's interesting. And he said, I'm always happy if I score sort of 70-60% of things where you think, well, actually that might be useful for us. So send it on to the appropriate people and teams within the organization, so they can review it as well. And if they think, yeah, well, actually this either removes a bottleneck, this removes hundreds of lines of code that we've written. So next time we're going to touch our application in that area, and we're going to rip that out and put this in, because then suddenly it scales. It's most likely on a total cost of ownership cheaper to do it that way. It's scaled, it's managed, so that's a part of your application you no longer need to worry about. Or this will open up new capabilities in driving value from an existing business application. So I think that's very, very exciting. The challenge is that new innovations come out so often and so rapidly that you can't expect all your application owners to follow that as diligently as possible. So that's one of the CCOE roles that you need to have.
Yeah.
But this also means that they need to understand the business side of it.
And that's a combination, of course. The pace is amazing, but also you have if you have a large migration, the level of maturity between the teams can also differ a bit. Yeah. So if you have teams that are less mature, then keeping up with innovation might be slightly more difficult than the teams who are already on AWS and driving everything serverless, for example.
It's so energizing and inspiring to hear the experiences from Stijn and Bas. Really amazing. If I look at the migration and modernization, definitely recognize the continuity. It's a continuous journey, continuous optimization and savings for the customers to be achieved. But by the end of the day, I believe that it's also about business benefits. I mean, how would a customer be able to digitally transform without a cloud platform? So I think it's a no-brainer. And then, of course, it's about a tangible business effect for our customers, not only in cost savings, but also are they able to bring their services and products faster to market thanks to the cloud? Are they able to innovate more by freeing up IT resources, again, the scarcity of the skills to do other more added value work? Well, those type of benefits, ultimately, that's what we do it for, to help make our customers happy.
Well, thanks. I think we're almost at the end of this video recording. So I would like to thank you all to join me here in the studio. And to the people watching, I would say if you have a workload that you would like to migrate, especially towards the AWS cloud, feel open to reach out to us and have an open conversation about the possibilities and also what the MAP program, the Migration Acceleration Program, can bring in for you. And with that, thanks all, and
thank you.
See you soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.